Hi everyone. Firstly, I'd like to begin by respectfully acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which I work and live, the Yuwi people. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend my acknowledgement to all Aboriginal members of the Birri Nation. Today we're in conversation with contemporary artist and fourth generation Australian South Sea Islander, Jasmine Togo Brisby, on the eve of her Art Space Mackay exhibition, Hom Swit Hom. As the title suggests, this is a kind of homecoming for Jasmine. Jasmine has spent the last 6 years working and studying in New Zealand. This is her first solo exhibition, and fittingly it takes place here in Mackay, home to the largest Australian South Sea Islander community. Welcome, Jasmine. Jasmine, your artistic practice centres around your identity as an Australian South Sea Islander, and you're a proud descendant of those who were blackbirded. For those who might be hearing the word blackbirded for the first time, could you explain this term?
Yeah, so blackbirding was actually a term which was used in the transatlantic slave trade. And it was to sort of express the abduction of dark bodies under the darkness of night. So that term, when slavery was abolished in America, that term made its way over to the Pacific and used as a colloquialism for the Pacific slave trade. So with us, this trade started in 1847 with the first ship going into Sydney till about 1904,
Yeah. You've spoken about your practice of making contemporary art, bringing about a kind of healing for yourself and your community. Can you speak to that healing process and what that's like to reflect on your narrative and your identity as an Australian South Sea Islander?
Yeah, I really feel like the works in themselves can be inherently have healing qualities. But I really use visibility as a strategy for that healing. I think there's so much invisibility of our people and our culture and our ancestors that just creating these spaces, doing what I'm, able to do as an artist and using the gallery, utilising the gallery as a space for South Sea belonging. I hope that brings a healing, yeah.
I'm sure it will, and I know that even reflecting on how long it took for Australian South Sea Islanders to get that kind of formal recognition from our state and federal governments, I think goes some way to showing us all that invisibility for such a long time. And as a gallery, I think we have a really big role to play so far as kind of creating safe spaces and introducing people to truth-telling, and we're so thrilled to be able to do that with your exhibition, Jasmine. Yeah. The exhibition title, Hom Swit Hom, can you give us a little bit of background to that, the meaning and the context for this show?
I feel like my exhibition in Mackay, even when I was a very young artist, was probably always going to get called Home Sweet Home. But just over the years, I guess, I wanted to complicate that a little more and not make it as sort of easy, I guess. So using Bislama, which is the common language used in Vanuatu, which is my ancestral homelands, using that language which was created by our ancestors in the holds of ships and in the sugarcane plantations as a way for many tribal groups to be able to communicate was a way to address that on another layer. But Mackay is definitely a home.
Yeah. It's a big moment for us, isn't it? Yeah. And something we've been dreaming and planning of for many, many years. So it's great to be here now on the eve of this exhibition. I wanted to talk to you a bit about Bittersweet, which is a particularly evocative installation. It comprises of hundreds of skulls cast in brown sugar and presented in a mound on the floor of a darkened room. Can you tell us about the meaning behind that work, or even the inception of it, where that started?
Yeah, I guess it was kind of obvious that in the younger years of my practice, that I would always utilize sugar in some sort of way. And as an artist, I'm really inspired by using like non-conventional mediums. But yeah, in 2012, there was a mass grave which was uncovered of our people on the outskirts of a Bundaberg plantation. And through that, like, I know that our community was really hurting, and obviously there was a lot of emotions at that time. And I couldn't sleep one night, and I got up, and something inside of me wanted to go onto the sugar websites, onto the sugar company websites, and have a look. And they actually had it at that time, in 2012, 2013, they had a history section on the page, and I clicked on it, and they only had images of post White Australia policy. So when there was only white labour on the plantations, there was no acknowledgement of our ancestors ever establishing those plantations. So I was really triggered, for lack of a better word. But yeah, that consistently erased time and time again, and I thought, well, I'll get the sugar myself. And I'll do. So the very next day I went to the grocery store and bought every single different type of sugar that there was, which was such a mix of emotions, even just that process of buying that product en masse. It was almost against the grain, but it had, that's what has to be done to make the work.
Yeah, amazing. And each one of those skulls you cast by hand, I can only imagine what that was like, even just in making the work and kind of reflecting on each of those skulls and the placement of them. It's a very... It was about 3 years actually, from start to actual finish to what we have today. And I moved to New Zealand midway through that process. So for me, it was really important as well that I was using Australian sugar. So like through my research, I sort of discovered that the Chelsea Sugar Refinery in New Zealand was actually sugar off the backs of our people, which was shipped to Auckland and then refined in their refinery there. Wow.
So they have that's a subsidiary, and there is one in Fiji as well. So that sugar didn't just go here,
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit too about a couple of different series, Adrift, as well as the beautiful cinematic Mother Tongue. We see 3 generations of Australian South Sea Islander women from your own family featured. There's yourself, your beautiful daughter Eden, and your mother Christine. What does it mean to share your artistic practice with your family?
It's the right thing to do, it would be weird if I didn't. As artists, we make from what we have access to, but as well, like as a South Sea Islander, like this is how we learn our stories, like my mum was raised by a granny who was abducted, so mum heard all those stories firsthand, the same way that I am. So, and my daughter, so it makes sense that they're part of it. And again, like with creating visibility, I think sometimes the best way to do that is with the body. There's no denying it. There's no denying it, and I think in this case, I wouldn't be vague around that,
There's real power in it too, to see those sort of 3 generations, and especially those works where it is quite ritualistic and there's a kind of coming together and a healing through the work. It's very powerful. Mother Tongue, as we mentioned earlier, it features this ritualistic blessing at the final resting site of a ship called the Don Juan. Can you tell us a little bit more about the significance of this historic shipwreck and your response to it?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how many years ago it was, but the Don Juan actually was the first ship of Ni Vanuatu people to be taken from Vanuatu and brought into Queensland in 1863. So growing up, the Don Juan was a household name. It was a significant moment of rupture for our people, and it's still commemorated and celebrated by our communities today. So to hear that the remains of that ship are still here, it's still very surreal, and I've known that and visited that site for I think about the last 4 years. So I really didn't, as I feel like I'm one of very few Australian South Sea Islanders who live in New Zealand, and most people in that region either don't know of the ship or they don't know of its significance. So as one of the only sort of South Sea Islander families in New Zealand, I thought we needed to do something. I did take my mum multiple times. It's a really hard work to talk about because it's so much unpacking.
Yeah.
But Mum definitely wanted to perform a blessing on the remains of the ship, and I thought we would capture that. And it's all organic. It's all, you know, the actual. Yeah, I didn't want it to be a performance. It was kind of. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It is. Yeah. It feels really intimate too when you're watching the film. You do feel like you're observing something that is really personal and really intimate, and I love it's very simple. There's nothing you know, terribly complicated about the piece, and I think that's where the power of it comes from. It's this moment of kind of reflecting on what that ship represents for Australian South Sea Islanders. It must have been quite a moment to realise that shipwreck was actually, it's close to Auckland, isn't it?
No, it's actually on the other island.
Okay, yeah. So how did you come across the shipwreck?
It was one of the historians who sort of works around the Pacific slave trade. He informed me of it, and then I sort of went down and it's it's such a hard work to talk about because it's not only a work, it's this genuine site which holds our history. And it's
and a moment too, I suppose, for yourself, your daughter and your mother too, actually performing that rite. So, yeah.
Sorry, I did have stuff to say, but I've just like blanked.
That's okay. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Australian South Sea Islander narrative. It's a really important part of our region's history and identity. What does it mean for you to bring this exhibition and show this work here in Mackay?
Mackay's got the largest population of Australian South Sea Islanders. You know, I have a lot of exhibitions in New Zealand and elsewhere, and that's great. But there's nothing like having your work shown to your immediate community.
I agree.
Sorry, I'm trying to fix my face. There's nothing like showing your work to the community that you're making it for. It's what I'm doing. You know? It's what I'm trying to do.
We're so grateful that we actually got to this moment. It has been very challenging. We've come up against all sorts of obstacles with our amazing global pandemic that nobody saw coming, and so it is such a moment for us too, Jasmine, and I know for our Australian South Sea Islander community this is a really, really special moment for them too, and I just wanted to thank you for persevering and for bringing us such a thought-provoking and exquisite exhibition. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for persevering.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's been great. So I would encourage all of you to come in and take Home Sweet Home in. It is a truly incredible exhibition. It's on until the end of March, and this exhibition spans across 2 of our gallery spaces, the main gallery and foundation gallery. It's such a privilege to have this incredible work here. I encourage everybody to come in and take a look at it yourself. Thank you.